Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to another episode of the Think Clinical podcast. My name is Hamza. It is good to be here and talk about such important topics. Today we are going to be looking at something around building predictable patient flow in your healthcare business, especially in Africa where I have practiced for so long. And most of what I'll be sharing in this episode will be based on some of the experiences I've had and what the implications have been for us. And to share with you some practical strategies. So if you are part of that group of people who sit down and have sleepless nights just because you are waiting or thinking whether or not patients will show up tomorrow to your clinic, which is the commonest model that we have in our hospitals in Africa, then this is for you, because it's time for you to start thinking about this differently. It is actually time for you to start building very predictable healthcare models that would predict your cash flow and your demand instead of relying on hope and prayer and strategies that were successful back then when we did not have such a high volume of private hospitals compared to now, where in every area you have probably between 10 to 20 private hospitals serving the same population and trying to scramble with the same numbers. So it's time to start thinking about this differently. And I've watched so many brilliant doctors with beautiful clinics in Africa, especially in Ghana where I grew up, where they have modern facilities, very qualified staff, and everything looks perfect, right? But they are only open for a couple of years, probably sometimes 2 years. And they closed down, not because they weren't good at medicine and not because they didn't have qualified people, but because they were very confused as to having a clinic with having a business. They did not really understand how to see their clinics as businesses, and that's what we have to be very, very honest with. So the truth here is that most healthcare businesses just fail very quietly, and it's because they bleed a lot of cash over a long period of time before they actually realize that they're in trouble, and by the time they notice that they have to actually close because they don't have the resources to continue going. So there are just three silent killers, and we have to look into these. You have to understand exactly what kills your business silently so that you can pay attention to them. And one of the biggest ones, which I was part of, and which I fell for, was the over-reliance on walk-ins and word of mouth. Because you build a clinic in a setting, especially in the African communities, and you hope that by the quality of service that you provide, people would be comfortable enough to go out there and talk about you and tell people about you. Yes, it does work, and we did build a clinic out of that. But the challenge with that is when you have a second competitor who is equally good and a third one who is equally good, all of a sudden that demand that you commanded in the beginning is no longer just yours, because the moment you slip or something happens or somebody offers something just a little different from what you've been offering, you are done for this. So we have to be able to understand what this means in the context of building that business. So when you are sitting around just hoping that people get sick and remember your name, that's not a business model. And in 2024, Africa has the lowest per capita pharmaceutical spend, which is under $25 per year, which means people do not have the money to spend as much as you think they do. So we have to be very realistic in what this means for businesses or for hospitals in the area. Now, the second silent killer that we all rely on is that there are no systems for demand creation. And the fact that you have a clinic, the fact that you're a good doctor, does not equate to demand. So you have to think about marketing differently. So real demand creation just means you understand that patients move through a journey. And they move from a place where they never even heard about you to a place where now they need to know and trust and come back to you, right? So it's a phase, it's a journey that they need to go through. And you need to understand that. So digital marketing is one of those things that you have to be able to rely on very heavily. And healthcare providers are now leveraging that a lot, especially in Africa, to be able to draw attention to themselves and create that demand. The third silent killer that we all have to be aware of is confusing visibility with value. So people go on Facebook, look at a company, look at a hospital and say, oh, they have 2,000 followers. That's not equal to demand. So the fact that you see all these followers is that doesn't mean they just translate directly to your patients. Do people really choose you when it comes to their healthcare needs? And these are the three things that we need to be paying attention to. We need to stop over-relying too much on walk-ins or people just coming by chance and waiting. You need to move away from you need to move towards creating systems that create demand, and you need to stop confusing visibility with value, because the fact that you have all these followers does not mean you are a valuable healthcare asset. So in order for you to understand this, you need to understand what we call the patient acquisition funnel, and this actually works because it takes you all the way from the point I told you. The patient goes through a journey from the time they do not know you to the time they become a trusted member of your patient team, right? So you need to understand that the funnel starts from awareness, which is the biggest part of the funnel, and as it narrows down, it goes through a trust process, which most people skip, and then you can convert them. That's when they actually trust you to be able to offer them the service that they need, and then you retain them. Now, every single step of this is very important. The disadvantage or the challenges we have with these is that most people skip some of these steps because they move right from awareness, hey, this is me, I'm here, I do this, to conversion. They skip the trust bit, so then it influences the last step, which is retention. Because if the patient doesn't trust you, yes, they will come to you, they will have their problem solved by you for that one time, but they'll never come back to you because you skipped what is in between, which is building trust with that patient. And so the last stage you missed out on that's retaining the patient. So these are very important. Now let's talk about awareness. Now, this is where digital meets the dirt roads, right? So patient organizations across Africa are playing an increasingly important role, providing psychosocial support, logistics, and financial support where health care falls short. So you need to be where your community already gathers, both online and offline. So you need to be present. So what really works? When you talk about community health talks at churches, right? I have done a couple of those. I've done some of those in communities. You can do what we call WhatsApp groups where you give health tips and people are able to leverage and use that to build that trust. And as I said, that trust bit of it is what actually helps you keep your patients through the whole funnel, right? And you also have to make sure that you are optimizing your searches so that you come up whenever a patient needs you. Okay. Now the second step from awareness is trust, which is where you win or lose. Now the average cost for a healthcare lead is $162 according to the industry reports, right? And that lead could be worthless if they don't trust you. So what that means is that if you spend $162 to actually get a patient, you have to be able to determine what that means for you, and we'll talk about the math of that later. So you have to be able to build trust, and that comes in the form of competence, not just displaying your credentials on the table. The conversion bit, which is the third stage of it, is it's the easiest thing. So most of the time, the patients are very sick. First of all, they just come to you. So but if you build a trust first, then you add the conversion bit where you actually make it very easy for people to book appointments with you. So make sure all your systems are mobile friendly. On a mobile phone now, use WhatsApp appointment requests where people can actually use WhatsApp to book appointments. You need to be very clear with your pricing. So anytime people go into a supermarket, every single item that you buy, including taxes and everything, is itemized for you. You need to be able to provide the same level of transparency for your patients so that they understand the exact cost of what is going into their treatment or why you are taking them the money that you are taking from them. So and you have to be aware of that. And the last one is retention, which is where fortunes are made or lost, because if you cannot retain your patients, you are always going to be spending money going after patients and coming back empty-handed or with the one-time hits and then they go away. Now let's talk about why retention beats acquisition every single time. And let's look at the math. So when you have a positive patient experience, which leads to longer relationships, they do not only return, but they will also give, by word of mouth, recommend you to family and friends, which is going to almost be like a free marketing tool for you. So let's say you're acquiring a patient at the cost of $50. The average patient visit, let's say, is $100. it looks profitable because you're going to make $50 out of it. So if this patient never comes back, you made $50. Not too bad, right? But now imagine that this patient comes back, and in addition to coming back, they're recommending you to other patients, which immediately shoots up their lifetime value to $3,000-$4,000, right? If you can retain a number of these patients, then what is happening for you is that you are doing less or investing less in acquiring patients and building and using more energy in trying to retain these people, which is easy for you to retain than going after new people. Now, healthcare providers should always aim for a 3-to-1 ratio, which means if you spend $1 in acquiring a patient, then you should be generating $3, which means the retention part of it is important for you to be able to retain that. Now, how do you achieve this? These are practical things that you can do. Now, the membership, the chronic conditions in Africa is growing exponentially. Now, people would always come back to you month on month for medications for their checkup, and they will want to be in a place where they feel secured and they feel like their resources are well protected in the way that they can rely on you to provide the continuous care that they need in their chronic conditions. So diabetes, hypertension, these people are going to come to you on a monthly, 2-monthly, 3-monthly basis, right? So if you have a membership or a subscription model in place where people are paying less, or they seem to pay less than what they should be paying if they had come for a one-time visit, that immediately creates value for you. And people do not understand what the importance of those membership plans are, but you need to be able to get annual wellness packages together. Make sure they are not breaking your company, but also make sure they're not breaking the patient's pocket, in which case you can actually retain chronic patients for a long time. Now, you need to also have follow-up processes that work, which means most clinics never call, ever. So encourage patients to book their next appointment before they leave your visit. And you need to have things like automated SMS reminders. You need to do check-in calls, especially after you do surgical procedures or you do procedures that need. These are necessary, and they are very necessary for you to be able to build that trust and retain that patient in the long term. And you need to also do what you call experience design. So from the moment they call, how do they feel? Do they feel rushed? Do they feel valued? Do they feel confused? Do they feel cared for? All these things go into making sure that patients really appreciate what or who you stand for as a company. Now, when you are turning the marketing into the math, let's do that and see how the profitable clinics usually will obsess about the numbers, not just the vibe, right? You don't feel like your business is doing well. The numbers have to tell you your business is doing well. So 3 metrics that you must track when you are marketing. You need to look at your cost per patient. How much are you spending to acquire each patient? Calculate it as the total marketing cost. How much are you pumping into marketing divided by the total number of new patients you acquired? That's your patient acquisition cost. That's the first metric you look at when you're marketing. The second metric is your patient lifetime value, which you calculate by the average value per visit multiplied by the number of visits per year, multiplied by the average patient lifespan in years, and that will tell you how much this patient. So if this patient has an average lifespan of 70 years, and let's say they have a chronic condition where they visit you monthly, so they visit you 12 times in a year, and then averagely you're getting $10 per that. You can use that to actually calculate the average lifetime value of that patient. And the third metric you look at when you're marketing is conversion rate at each stage. How many people who see your content visit your website? How many who visit your website actually book appointments? And how many who come to you actually return? So you have to be looking at these conversion metrics at every stage of this. Now, when we look at real-time examples, and I'm going to give you just some 2 contrasting case studies where you can look at one clinic that spent $10,000 on a billboard, and that billboard attracted 50 new patients. Now, if the cost of each patient is $200, it means that this person made $10,000 from this, and they spent $10,000. So averagely, they've actually lost from this advertisement. But let's say you go into a community and you spend $3,000 on a community health education series, and during that process you build a WhatsApp page, takes people contact information, and enroll, let's say, 500 people. and then you create a referral program from that. Now, if you got let's say 100 new patients from this, and the average cost per patient is not $100 but $30, that is 30 times 100 for the 100 patients. 60% of these patients will now be enrolled in membership programs, which now immediately doubles your patient numbers without even adding doctors. So you have to look at what the ROI is on some of these investments you make in marketing. Now, you should always focus on community presence and education. If you are in the African setting, you have to look at systems for conversion and retention, which is very important, because now you're moving away from, hey, let's wait and see who walks in with an emergency, and you have to measure and optimize every single dollar that you spend. You should stop spending doing expensive big advertising initiatives which have very little ROI. And you should just avoid waiting on walk-ins, which I think is one of the biggest things that are killing clinics in the African continent. So calculate your cost per patient acquisition, then calculate your patient lifetime value. These are the two assignments that I'm giving you today. And if you do that, and if you don't know these numbers, you have to know them, because then you don't have a business. You need to start looking at your clinic as a business in order to stay competitive. This has been another episode of the Think Clinical Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us once again. My name is Hamza. So it's good to be here, and have a wonderful day.